This is the world recording to Jen and Carolyn.
Hey everybody.
Hey.
So we're going to start this new thing where we do these emergency podcasts. Anytime we see anything super egregious and freaky that we think you should be paying attention to, we're going to try to do, a 20 to 30 minute podcast where we kind of call this out.
Yeah. This brought up a lot of feelings for me, Jen.
Did it really?
It really
do you
did.
Do you have big feelings like my kid?
I had the biggest feelings about this to the point where I was yelling, like I was getting angry.
Not only do we have big feelings, but we have a special guest.
Yay.
Megan, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, Megan.
I'm really excited to be here. My name's Megan. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I went to school with Carolyn.
Yes, you did. Megan saved my life on the first day of school when I couldn't figure out how to make the USF computers work and was having a hard time logging into class.
Well, they don't make it easy.
No.
I say this as a graduate and as somebody who worked there. So you survived. Thanks to Megan.
Yeah.
So welcome, Megan. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We have all watched the Escaping Twin Flame documentary on Netflix. We all agree it's absolutely bonkers. And we thought it was worthy of an emergency podcast because this is an active cult. And what this documentary does, which I think is interesting, this is a cult in progress.
Yes.
Typically what you see is a documentary about the aftermath of a cult, right? Jim Jones or, David Koresh,
right.
Whatever. Name your cult. Name your poison. No, I shouldn't say that. That's bad.
I know, right? No pun intended.
Name your Kool-Aid? No. But we thought that this was so bad, so egregious, and so worthy of attention that we decided to do this emergency podcast here. So what is a twin flame? So first of all, check out the documentary on Netflix. But what is a twin flame? This is from a Mind Body Green article, whatever that is. Don't know how valid this site is. And before I get to what they said in the article, since they published the article, they actually published a disclaimer that said, note, since this article was first published, an online cult known as Twin Flame Universe has surfaced, promising users they can help you find your twin flame. Always be wary of anyone who promises they can find you love for a fee. The concept of twin flames has been around for a long time before this cult, and you do not need to and probably shouldn't pay anyone to help you. I say this is a former professional matchmaker who had people pay for this service.
Jen's match made my relationship, although I didn't pay you for that.
You're the only successful one I have under my belt. When I was doing this professionally, I had nothing to my credit. Absolutely nothing. It's probably because I'm only half Jewish, so I kind of suck at this shit. Anyway, happy Hanukkah, everybody.
Thank you. Happy Hanukkah to you, too.
Second night of Hanukkah.
Woo-woo.
Yes, we lit the menorah. We did our due diligence.
Yes.
Our religious due diligence. So we should probably talk first and foremost about what is a twin flame?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so apparently it's an intense soul connection with someone thought to be a person's other half, sometimes called a mirror soul. It's based on the idea that sometimes one soul gets split into two bodies. That's beautiful.
Oh.
Don't know if I buy
How
into it.
How unattainable, too.
Right?
Lovely.
Totally. Okay, so, but these folks, this self-styled guru named, what's his name? Jeff Ayon.
Yeah.
And then what is his
I bet
wife?
that's made up.
It's totally made up. And what does his wife call himself? Shalia?
Shalia.
She gave herself, that's not her real name. But anyway, so these two winners decided to take this concept of twin flame, which is a beautiful concept.
Yes.
And other concepts, which, like white people, they stole from other cultures,
yes.
like Hinduism.
Yes.
And they turned it into a way to not only build people out of money and generate profit, but coerce and manipulate to an extent that is not only dangerous, but illegal.
Yeah.
And so I found some really good stuff from a Vox article that's, talks about this and how it is, in fact, coercive control. Would you guys agree? It's coercive control.
They put post-traumatic stress syndrome on anyone who's part of that cult.
Oh yeah.
And criminal, in my opinion, the amount of trauma and the amount of it's abuse. Don't get me started.
Yeah.
It's abuse.
Yeah. It's abuse. Thank you.
Yeah.
Simplest level.
It really is. It absolutely is. And, this Vox article says, on its face, the idea might sound like a straightforward scam. The type that often manipulates and commodifies New Age practices and beliefs in order to rip off people looking for love. And I think you as therapists know this, and me as a former matchmaker know this. People are willing to do nearly anything for the promise of love.
Yes.
We're human beings. Yeah. That's what we want.
Yeah.
Love and acceptance. Yeah. And these people are preying
I could give you that, but first let me have your credit card.
Right, exactly. Welcome to this pyramid scheme where I shit on you and treat you poorly.
Exactly.
Right, and this is what it says. One twin flame guru named Jeff In used the concept to fund a $1 million lifestyle built from the profits of his paradoxically not-for-profit organization, the Twin Flame Universe, or as we're going to refer to it, TFU. TFU is much more than a matchmaking service and money-making scheme. Former members of the organization allege that In uses cult-like coercion and multi-level marketing tactics to control his followers. So they go through all of this over the course of 3 episodes that are in this documentary. It's amazing. And then we talked about her briefly. Well, In and his wife, Shalia, insist their group isn't a cult. Escaping twin flames will at least ensure that you will never think about soulmates in quite the same way again.
Yeah. And you got, what starts off is kind of like, okay, this is weird. Like the warning that should be on this, if you are in, it's as someone not part of the trans community, I was in tears watching this. So I can't even imagine it, or, watching the parents. Mm-hmm. Oh, that mother.
The parents, it's agonizing to watch the parents who have lost their children to this cult. And it's very similar to any time you've ever seen a parent interviewed who has lost their child to a cult.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
And what this cult, what Jeff and his wife they do, and we'll get into it a little bit later when we talk about why this is a cult, is they separate you from your family.
Yeah.
And you might have the best family in the world. Like, no family is without fault, right? We're only human. But they will convince you that your family has fucked you up. They're terrible people and you should no longer interact with them.
Simply because your family disagrees with the fact that you might be in a cult.
Right. Right. So therapists, break it down for us. Let's talk about some of the most horrific lies, because the lies are numerous, but let's just narrow down some of them that these cult leaders encourage their followers to swallow. Tell us about it.
Well, the first thing I'm struck with in episode 1 is, as someone who's in the healing community, a lot of what they say starts to track. They're talking about concepts and, they immediately bring up this intensity of connection. And we've talked about this from a scientific standpoint, that we know that that's part of a stage of love, right? That you start off in lust, and that draws us into even things we know aren't good.
Limerence. You taught me that.
Lust, all these things. But they make so being a twin flame, and I didn't know this until and I'll show you my funny drawing, Jen, you'll laugh. So
you did a drawing?
But the whole time that you're watching this, you're kind of going, okay, this makes sense. Like, of course, yes, your soulmate. We've heard these words. I'd never heard twin flame before.
Right.
But they're taking actual concepts you would hear when you're talking about soul work or soul connections. Mm-hmm. But then they pervert them. And I really mean that word when I say pervert them. So the concept of a twin flame comes from Plato's The Symposium.
Wow.
And Megan and I were
taking it way back.
Taking it way back.
That's the OG twin flame, Plato.
OG twin flame. And Megan and I were talking about this because we're like, dude, he probably just got really high on some fucking something he found.
Some psychedelic. This is how this all came to fruition.
Old ass wine that got fermented too long. And he would write these plays. And so he wrote this play called The Symposium. And I'll show you my drawing here. So it was believed that humans were actually one big body with 4 sets of legs, or 2 sets of legs, 2 sets of arms, and each genitalia.
Have you seen Hedwig and the Angry Inch?
Yes.
This is from Hedwig.
I wasn't paying attention during that show.
That's even the lyric. They have 2 sets of arms and 2 sets of legs. That shit is a lyric.
You would know that, you musical theater person.
I know. Raised by a lesbian.
And so the gods were like, no, that's too much for one person. We're going to split that body in half.
Yeah.
And basically, you're going to spend your whole life looking for that other half.
I love it. And now I want to watch Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
As a formerly single woman too, like you do have this like, I'm looking for my soulmate. I'm looking for this other person, and I've said it too before. I'm like, oh, I had this really strong connection with someone, and then they basically take that normal desire, and that's kind of, I think, sort of healthy dichotomy, you could say, that happens even in any relationship, and they capitalize on that.
Yeah.
So
What do you think, Megan?
What do you think, Meg?
So I feel like they've taken twin flame and they truthfully have even changed the entire concept of it, because what I understand twin flame to be from the spiritual work I've done over the last couple of years, you're not always supposed to be with your twin flame. So before you come into this life, your soul essentially plans the journey that you will experience, because the purpose of this lifetime is to help your soul develop just as your brain and body develop. So you meet with your soul families before coming into life, and you essentially create these contracts where whatever your soul development is, whatever your soul development is, we're going to show up exactly as we need to in order for this development to happen.
Cool.
But it doesn't always mean that it's good, if that makes sense, right? Like if you think about struggles and challenges, you may not necessarily want to be with your twin flame, because that opposite is going to mirror to you something that needs to be potentially mirrored back to you.
That makes sense.
And so to force this connection between people when the actual reality, from my understanding of it, is that you're not always supposed to be with your twin flame, are you potentially keeping people more stagnant or in unhealthy relationships when the purpose of their soul is maybe to, I don't know, say no?
Got it.
We talked about
that makes sense.
The concept of not only do you need to learn to say no, but you also have to learn to hear no.
Yeah.
And I don't think the founders of the Twin Flame Foundation or whatever the fuck they are, I don't think they know how to hear the word no.
I don't think they can do either.
I don't think
no doesn't translate into dollars, y'all. So you got yes means give us more money. It's like Scientology.
So when all the guys I would date would tell me like you'd be such a great wife like 10 years from now when I'm ready, were they not my twin flame then? Was that them not meeting me in that place?
No, but Jeff would have told you pursue these motherfuckers nonetheless. It doesn't matter if it culminates in a restraining order. You got to keep going
Until the sun goes down.
Yes.
Terrible. So again, that concept is a real concept, and then they fuck it up.
Yep, they do. They do. Tell us about what you consider to be the second biggest lie they perpetuate.
When we talked about this too, and I think you and I were texting back and forth when we started watching this, so I was like, they're taking actual psychological terminology and clinical concepts such as mirroring, detaching, victim perpetrator, having a healthy body.
Yeah.
And they take it, we talked about taking it to a space of actually abusive power structure and tyranny.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, again, these are mirroring as I see you, I'm going to reflect to you something that I find, what is it? We often don't like in others what we don't like in ourselves, or we criticize in others what we're critical in ourselves and things like that. So they take some of this stuff where you're like, okay, well, I'm on board with you here, Jeff and Shalia, but then they make it mean.
Yes, they're mean.
They're mean, and they make you feel ashamed. There's such a dripping of shame and ickiness that it's so palpable that it hurt to watch.
Well, and it's all of these elements, but then within this greater, and I don't know that we necessarily touched on this earlier, but this kind of just came in, there are all these elements within the power and control wheel. Yeah. So if you really look at that abusive structure, it's like all of those things are still being met, but the deliverance of it are these words that somebody, if you are maybe just, surface level understanding something and you have a connection with the person who says, I'm going to be your guide or your guru or whatever, right? There's a trust that becomes built, but the underlying intention of it is coercion and deceit.
It's like third party intimate partner violence.
Yeah.
It's fucking nuts.
It's wild.
Well, you had such a great example of the unethical, there's zero ethics.
None.
But the trustee beneficiary.
So I love using the analogy of trust law for things like this, because when you have a trust, right, there is something that is, we're just going to say, sacred, protected. As a trustee, you are responsible for doing whatever is required of that trust. The beneficiary is only supposed to benefit.
Okay.
So there is this in this relationship, right? As the coach, as the mentor, I am supposed to be the trustee. The client is supposed to be the beneficiary. Yeah. What happens in these structures is the trustee gives to the beneficiary, but in that coercive way, the beneficiary, the roles become switched, and now the trustee benefits from the beneficiary. And that's not supposed to happen. That completely violates trust law in its fullest sense. Yeah. And so all of that comes back to this element then of, again, fraud and those different pieces, because if you are going to switch that, no one's really benefiting. Well, you're benefiting, right? Because someone's benefiting, but not the person who should be benefiting, especially the individual who goes to somebody seeking, I don't want to say answers, but they're looking for some type of help, guidance, care. Yeah. They are only supposed to benefit from that relationship. You are not supposed to benefit from them wanting your relationship.
It sounds like not only are they not benefiting, but they're being exploited and abused.
Yes.
Like, that's just, whoa.
Didn't it strike you how, like, what was, like, everyone looked glazed over.
Oh, yes.
And everyone looked, like, just sad. And again, it's all built on this premise that once you find your twin flame, or your unhappiness is directly linked to not having someone else.
Right.
And anytime someone starts going down that train of anything in life, I always feel like that's a bad place.
Well, I felt really bad for that woman. I think her name was Marley. Yeah. And they're
the sister.
Well, her sister, absolutely, but the woman who was actually in the cult, who they encouraged.
She was the one who spoke the most, and they encouraged her transition.
Yes. And they, no, she didn't transition, but she was the one who they're like, oh, this person who's mentally ill, who's 11 years older than you, and abusive and has a criminal record, this is your twin flame. And they became kind of spokespeople. Mm-hmm. And she would be crying when she was talking about their relationship, but she would be talking about it positively. But all this hurt is what was coming through. Yeah. Those weren't tears of joy, man.
No, and they're like, this is just part of it. You got to keep on going. And it was just like,
gosh.
What the hell are you guys talking about? And that's
awful.
Getting into this, like, twisting of not just psychological concept, but then they twist spiritual concepts.
Yeah. No, we were talking about this, like, more problematic stuff, right? Like encouraging people to stalk their twin flame and be relentless, even if it means getting arrested and getting restraining orders, which happened with multiple people who were interviewed in this documentary. They had been arrested for stalking. Encouraging people to pursue their twin flame regardless of that person's relationship status or sexual identity. Insane. Remember the one woman who like sent a text disclosure, like heart and soul to this person who was openly gay, and he was like, I am not your twin flame. You need to leave me alone. I'm in a relationship with a man. Like, I don't want this.
You're not. You just haven't committed to letting go. That was just a hurdle for her to climb over, apparently.
Gosh. And then what's worse, we touched on this briefly, but the exploitation of I wouldn't even go, it's not exploitation of trans folks. It's like taking something sacred like gender identity and saying, this is your gender identity, because a twin flame relationship can only exist between somebody who is, the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Oh, you've never identified as a man before? Surprise, you're the divine masculine. So start your transition now. Mm-hmm. And people are like, okay, which is a complete bastardization of being transgender and gender expression.
Yeah. And it's so, I love it was like a professor that they had who came on was like, this makes it seem like this is something that's a choice, or that a feeling that you go through, right? Not something someone tells you to do.
Right. That professor was insightful. Oh, he was really good.
So helpful.
Or they were good. Yeah.
And 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 again, this whole concept of divine masculine and divine feminine is a Jungian concept. Yeah. And you would talk to me about the anima and the animus, which always makes me think of anuses.
What doesn't make you think of anuses.
I don't know.
This is true. I've lived with her for 5 days now.
Freud was
There's
right.
so much butt talk.
Right? Freud was right about this bitch.
My anus is my twin flame. I don't know what to say. But, again, so here they're taking something that is a spiritually sacred concept. And, again, there are qualities of male and female, right? We know that that's a truth for some people.
Yeah.
And when Jung talked about it, was seeking an ideal partner and relationship. And then it had to do with kind of how you viewed your mother, how you viewed your father. Mm-hmm. So again, this gets very deep. And then I've also heard of it in terms of spirituality, but I like how it's always been, whenever I say divine feminine, divine masculine to people, I'm like, don't think gender.
Right.
Like gender is a made up construct.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also very specific here.
Yeah.
How would you describe divine feminine, Megan, and divine masculine?
They're both energies, and regardless of your gender identity, you have both. Because essentially the divine feminine, when you really look at the totality of, I'm going to put capital H, her for this, it is the creation, the sustaining, and the destruction. And so if you think about even just women giving birth, right, there is an entire process that occurs. The masculine energy really comes in as this like protection, action. You can even kind of equate it to like the sun and the moon, right? Like the masculine energy is the sun, action, go, what needs to happen, movement. Fire. Exactly.
Okay.
Feminine, that emotional, that softness, just all the pieces of emotionality, but you have to have both.
Yeah.
Somebody made kind of the analogy to me one day that really struck, positively with me. But they were like, if you have kids playing outside, right, like that's the feminine, you're going to feel more protective if the fence is around and they're not playing next to the street, right? So that fence becomes the masculine. That holds the ability for the feminine to grow, nurture, right? There's just this, so you have to have both, right? Because you're never, if you're just in one or just the other, there are going to be aspects that just from an inherent nature aspect, you lose.
Yeah.
So to say that one person is only one and you have to find the thing in the other, you start to operate within
a binary,
a binary and a completely false reality.
Social
like
construct.
it's so
well, and even within divine feminine and divine masculine, there's wounded feminine and wounded masculine.
Yeah.
So even within these they're not monoistic topics. They're poly. Everything.
It's far more complex than these assholes make it out to be.
Absolutely. Yes.
And then you can add in various levels of consciousness. Like there's so many different elements that these particular energies are connected to. And to simply kind of like dissect it and cut it to be like this and this is just
black and white nonsense.
Horrific.
I think they just ran out of men. And then they started telling all the women, "Oh no, you're a lesbian."
I was like, that's exactly it. And they talk about that.
Yeah.
That's how it was when I worked at the dating service. It was tons of women. Well, they didn't encourage anybody.
I was like, wait, what?
It wasn't quite that bad, but there were
intervention for post experience.
I need therapy. I've been in therapy, but there was far more women than there were men, and so obviously this is a much more distilled, like less injurious and toxic way to do it. But it was like the concept was 3 men and 3 women would go out together, and I don't know, scientifically somewhere along the line somebody said this works for meeting people and like sparking connections.
It won't hurt.
Whatever.
Right?
But the point is there was
some masculine energy out there, right? We're forcing this system.
But there was very little masculine energy, or there was repetitive masculine energy, because there were so few men that you would have to talk these women into going on the dates and be like, there's one dude on this table you haven't met before and you've got to meet him. And you're like, this dude checks none of her boxes. But
literally.
It's the one out of 3 dudes that this person hasn't met yet. So the lies, but
well, and again, this is where it's like if Megan or I did this, we would lose our licenses.
Well, of course.
I mean, and even just not for that, it's wrong.
Yep.
Like, I just don't operate that way. And that's what, at no point did I see in the film that there was any, this is why I'm sometimes okay with governing bodies sort of putting some structure on things. But I also think you have anyone who goes into the healing for profession, if you're in it for the money, like, I'm sorry, like, good luck. But you know what I mean? It's like your ethics and your desire to want to do good versus doing harm would never put your client or your customer or
in this space.
Yeah. So clearly we'll get into it, that these are not good people.
No, they're out there to make money exclusively. So, we're getting to the end of this because this is supposed to be a brief one, but we could talk, all night about this shit.
All night.
Yeah, because it's so fascinating. But we, ultimately, we want you to watch the documentary, draw your own conclusions, but really listen to us because this is some dangerous shit. So, there's a couple more things we haven't mentioned yet that are, fall into the category of manipulative, unethical, really egregious shit. How about telling people to eat like super unhealthy, high fat, high carb diets?
That was so
where everybody
weird.
was gaining significant amounts of weight and feeling like shit.
That?
So I think the point of that is if you look at it from like the cycle of power control, right? The purpose is to strip you of your inherent self-worth.
Oh.
And so if I'm not because I don't do this, but like if I were one of them, right?
Yeah.
And you're adding in these dietary pieces, all of those foods, and my guess is half of that stuff was processed anyway, right? Like there are so many variables to consider in mood when it comes to nutrition.
They're trying to give everyone depression.
Exactly.
Is what I
exactly. That it's this like stripping away of and making you feel worse about yourself. So that way you become more connected to the person that is doing it.
That makes sense. No, it totally makes sense because when he first started dating Shayla or whatever, she was kind of, on the leaner side, and then he's
like better.
Like 40 pounds or something like that.
Yeah.
And I like it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and we should do what our men like, right? I'm kidding.
No, I know. Well, I caught the sarcasm in your voice. I'm sure everybody else did too.
I thought it was a part 2 of like, we're controlling you.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to control what you eat.
That's definitely part of it.
Part of it. Absolutely.
Okay.
For sure. And that dude Jeff is a fucking asshole. And this is from that article. They said it's impossible to overstate what an abrasive personality Ian has, as I think that's how you say his name. Who cares? As captured extensively on film in the documentary, he frequently speaks in a grating, mocking voice. He asserts to queer members of the group that queer identity isn't real and appears unfazed when members break down sobbing in conference calls. He berates, interrupts, and belittles group members and his wife, whom he often talks down to and forbids from speaking. At one point, he describes throwing
Shalia,
is that her name? Okay. Down on the bed and forcing himself on her. Oh, and that's another thing.
Yeah.
Women must always submit to their men. Whenever they want sex, you got to be willing to part them legs.
But then she ended up liking it. So was it wrong?
She looked real happy.
Yeah, she looked real happy.
Watch and judge for yourselves. Okay.
So
wrap it up for us, guys.
This man is a narcissistic, antisocial sociopath. I'm just going to go ahead and diagnose this motherfucker.
Do it. Yeah.
Now, here's my thing with Shalia. I don't know how to feel about her. In one hand, I think she's an abused partner.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, I also think she in turn becomes an abuser because she's appeasing her abuser. Mm-hmm. It's like someone in captive. It's like what's her name? Ghislaine Maxwell.
Or JC, the woman who abused JC.
The
wife of the abuser.
Because that's your way of holding power with this perpetrator. So as a therapist, but I think anyone who holds a license or anyone who has ethics, we talked about this, therapists, healers, coaches, teachers, yogis, we all use the words that they're using. Clearing, mirroring, energy. These are powerful words, and I actually feel a lot of these words are sacred when you use them. But to use terms in this way that creates harm is not only unethical, I think it's criminal. I don't understand how this is allowed.
Yeah.
But when you think about the fact that there's a capitalist gain happening here, whenever there's financial abundance and grandiosity, you should be questioning. And they're pretty grandiose in how he's like, well, when I first met you, Shalia, you were wearing pajamas and now you're covered in Chanel.
Right? He's rolling around in his Tesla.
Yeah. And they're not even trying while their members are like, their lives are falling apart.
Whatever it was. Yeah, it was terrible.
Makes me angry.
And just to add to that, look at what you were before I came in. Everything that is taught is truly the antithesis of self-growth. Because if you go to anybody and they tell you that they will give you a fix for something or that you can pay for something outside of yourself, you will never have the success that you are looking for. No. Everything has to be this internal, connecting back to your intuition, connecting back to this listening to yourself and letting that filter be something in your life so you can make the choice. So anytime there is this, I have the answer for you, red flag should always go up.
Yes.
And any good leader or guru would not want you to think of them as that.
Yeah.
They would be like, I'm fucked up too. Don't listen to me.
Right? I'm an asshole. You're an asshole.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, wrapping this up in a neat little bow. This is a cult. This is a fucking cult. And what makes this a cult? There are some very pervasive culty themes that you see across cults. One of which is when the leader claims to be Jesus himself.
Yeah.
In the documentary where he says, oh yes, Jesus was definitely, you know, of darker skin tone, et cetera, and all these pictures you see of Jesus, that's actually of me. They were drawing those pictures of me because I'm the second or the third coming of Christ, whatever he was referring to himself as. Crazy, right? Okay. Separating people from their families. We talked about that. That's a cult classic. Yeah. Breaking down people so they can control them. Another one. Making money off of people, investing thousands in programs, which sounds like Scientology to me.
Yeah.
So, you know, collectively, this is a coercive, abusive, you know, exploitative on a lot of levels, including financial.
Go find them, IRS.
What's that?
Go find them, IRS. They're trying to say religious. We're going to get them, not me.
Yeah, tax them. Tax the shit out of them. So anyway, we encourage you to watch this. Come to your own conclusions. But yeah, we thought it was important enough to rise to the level of an emergency podcast. So we hope you enjoyed our first emergency pod. Thank you, Megan, for being with us.
Yay.
And we'll see you next week as we talk about some cool shit.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.